Ever had one of those moments where you're just going about your day feeling perfectly fine and then suddenly, BAM! You're hit with a wave of intense emotion, whether it's anger, anxiety, or sadness, out of nowhere. Maybe it was a specific smell, a familiar phrase, or a song that set it off. It's like an emotional time machine, transporting you back to a past moment you thought you'd moved on from. That's the power of psychological triggers, and today we're breaking down what they are, why they affect us so deeply, and most importantly, how to manage them. This episode is a collaboration of experts to provide you with a deeper understanding, and the voice you're hearing represents a unified perspective from our team.
Ever had one of those moments where you're just going about your day feeling perfectly fine, and then suddenly, bam, you're hit with this wave of intense emotion? Could be anger, anxiety, even sadness, out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And it can be anything that sets it off.
Right.
Like a certain smell, a phrase someone uses, even a specific place. It's like an emotional time machine, you know?
It is.
Zapping you back to a past experience you thought you'd moved on from.
Yeah.
That's the power of psychological triggers.
It really is.
And that's what we're diving deep into today. So
fascinating stuff.
it is fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll help you understand what makes these triggers tick and what you can do about them.
Yeah. It's amazing how these triggers could just be lurking there beneath the surface.
Right.
And sometimes they catch us completely off guard.
Yeah.
We might not even realize what's happening until we're already overwhelmed with feelings.
Absolutely. It's like our brains have these secret pathways that lead straight to those emotionally charged memories.
Yeah.
Think about it. Have you ever heard a song
Oh, yeah.
that instantly transported you back to a specific moment, like a first date?
Absolutely.
Or a childhood vacation?
100%.
Like, boom, you're right back there.
Yeah. Powerful stuff.
It is powerful stuff.
The senses.
Yeah.
Our senses can have this incredible power to unlock, just a flood of feelings and memories.
Okay, so we know triggers can be powerful, but let's break down exactly what they are.
Okay.
I think, since you're joining us for this deep dive,
Right.
you're probably already pretty familiar with the basics.
Yeah.
So we can skip the technical definitions and jump right into the interesting stuff.
Good.
What's happening in our brains when we get triggered?
Well, it involves a complex interplay between different parts of the brain.
Okay.
Imagine your brain is like a high-tech security system.
I like that.
Yeah, so you have the amygdala, which is like the alarm system, constantly scanning for threats.
Right.
And when it detects a trigger, something that reminds it of a past negative experience, it sets off just a cascade of reactions.
So it's like our brains are on high alert.
Yeah.
Even if the current situation isn't actually dangerous.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. The amygdala can actually hijack our rational thinking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So think of it like this. You have the amygdala all fired up about a perceived threat.
Okay.
And then you have the prefrontal cortex, which is like the control center,
Okay.
trying to make sense of what's going on. But the problem is the connection from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, the part that helps us think logically,
Right.
isn't as strong as the connection going the other way.
So it's like our emotions are in the driver's seat
Yes.
and logic is stuck in the back seat.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's why it can be so hard to think clearly when you're in the middle of a trigger.
Right.
Your emotions are running the show.
Yeah.
And it takes time for your rational brain to catch up.
Wow, that makes so much sense. So we've got this alarm system going off. Our brains are struggling to make sense of it all.
Yeah.
But where do these triggers come from in the first place? I mean, what kinds of experiences can lead to these intense reactions?
Well, triggers can stem from all sorts of experiences, particularly ones that left a strong emotional mark on us.
Okay.
Think about it. Have you ever felt deeply hurt by rejection?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe being left out of a social event?
Oh, yeah.
Or having someone break a promise?
Absolutely. The rejection can be brutal,
It is.
especially if it taps into old wounds from the past.
Exactly. And for someone who's been through a lot of rejection or betrayal, even small things can trigger those old feelings
Right.
of worthlessness or abandonment.
Yeah.
It's like their brain is saying, hey, watch out. This can be dangerous.
Right.
Even if the situation isn't actually that threatening.
So it's like our past experiences are shaping how we react in the present, even if we don't realize it.
That's right. And this is where understanding the neuroscience can be so helpful.
Okay.
Knowing that your brain is wired to protect you, even if it's sometimes overreacting,
Right.
can help you start to reframe those reactions.
That's a great point. It's like instead of judging ourselves for being too sensitive or overreacting, we can start to see these triggers as a sign that our brains are trying to keep us safe, even if it's in a slightly misguided way.
Exactly. And once we understand that, we can start to develop strategies to manage those triggers more effectively.
That's what I'm really interested in learning more about. What can we actually do to take back control when those triggers hit?
Yeah.
But before we dive into that,
Okay.
let's talk about some other common trigger themes.
Sure.
You mentioned rejection.
Uh-huh.
What about things like failure or criticism?
Oh, yeah.
I know some people who just absolutely shut down when they receive negative feedback, even if it's meant to be helpful.
That's a great example, and it often ties back to early experiences.
Okay.
Imagine growing up in an environment where achievement was highly valued and mistakes were met with harsh criticism or disappointment.
I can see how that would make someone incredibly sensitive to any kind of negative feedback, even as an adult.
Yeah.
It's like they're constantly trying to prove themselves.
Right.
And avoid any hint of failure.
Exactly. And this can create a cycle where they avoid taking risks or trying new things because the fear of failure is so strong.
So it's like those early experiences have created a blueprint in their brain that says failure is dangerous and you need to avoid it at all costs.
That's a great way to put it. And that blueprint can be incredibly powerful, even if it's not serving us well in the present.
This is also fascinating. It's like we're peeling back the layers of our emotional responses and starting to understand the deeper mechanisms at play.
It is fascinating.
I'm starting to see my own experiences in a whole new light.
I know.
What about triggers related to abandonment?
Okay.
This seems to be a common theme, especially in relationships. Absolutely. Think about it this way. Our early relationships, especially with our caregivers, shape our understanding of how relationships work.
Right.
If you experienced inconsistent caregiving or felt like your needs weren't met as a child, it can make you hypersensitive to any signs of abandonment in your adult relationships.
That makes perfect sense. It's like your brain is constantly scanning for any indication that you might be left alone or rejected, just like in those early experiences.
Exactly. And this can lead to a lot of anxiety and insecurity in relationships.
Wow.
Even if your partner is completely committed and loving.
So even small things like a partner being late or forgetting to call can trigger a cascade of anxious thoughts and feelings.
It's quite possible. And it's not about being irrational or overreacting.
Right.
It's about understanding that those reactions are rooted in past experiences that have shaped your brain's wiring.
Okay, so we've covered some pretty heavy stuff. Rejection, failure, abandonment.
Yeah.
Are there any other types of triggers we should be aware of? Well, you might be surprised to know that even our senses, sight, sound, smell, can act as powerful triggers.
Interesting.
Yeah. Imagine you're walking down the street and suddenly you catch a whiff of a familiar scent that takes you right back to a specific memory.
Okay.
It could be something pleasant like your grandmother's baking, or it could be something unsettling like the smell of disinfectant from a hospital stay.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I once smelled a specific perfume that instantly transported me back to a childhood memory I hadn't thought about in years.
Wow.
It was like a time warp.
It's amazing, isn't it? Those sensory experiences can bypass our conscious thought processes and tap directly into those deep emotional memories.
So even if we haven't consciously thought about a specific event in years, our senses can still trigger those feelings and memories as if it happened yesterday.
It's remarkable, isn't it? Our senses have this incredible power to connect us to our past in ways we might not even realize.
This is all so eye-opening. It's like we're uncovering these hidden pathways in our brains and starting to understand the forces that shape our emotional landscape.
Yeah, absolutely.
It makes me wonder, how can we even recognize when we're being triggered if these reactions are often so subconscious?
That's a great question, and it's a crucial step in learning to manage those triggers.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that next.
Yes, let's. So how can we learn to spot these triggers when they, kind of pop up?
Yeah.
Especially if they're often operating beneath the surface like we've been talking about.
Right.
Any tips on how to become more aware of them, as we're going about our daily lives?
Well, think of it like becoming a detective of your own emotions.
Okay.
You're looking for clues and patterns that signal a trigger might be at play.
Okay.
It's not always obvious, and it's different for everyone.
Right.
But there are some common signs to watch out for.
Okay, so what kind of clues should we be looking for?
Let's start with the emotional realm. Have you ever noticed a sudden and intense shift in your mood? That seems way out of proportion to what's actually happening.
Like going from 0 to 60 in a split second.
Exactly.
I think we've all been there.
Yeah, that's a classic sign that a trigger might be lurking.
Okay.
You might feel a surge of anger, anxiety, or sadness seemingly out of the blue.
Right.
Or on the flip side, you might experience a sudden numbness or detachment.
Interesting.
Like you're shutting down emotionally.
It's like those emotions hijack your whole system and you're left wondering where they even came from.
That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
And it's not just about our emotions. Our bodies often give us clues as well.
Oh.
Pay attention to any physical sensations that arise
Okay.
when you feel that sudden emotional shift.
You mean like a racing heart or sweaty palms? I definitely get those when I'm feeling anxious.
Yes, those are common physical signs of a trigger.
Okay.
You might also experience shaking, muscle tension, difficulty breathing, or even nausea.
Wow.
It's like your body is going into fight or flight mode,
Right.
even if there's no real danger present.
It's fascinating how connected our minds and bodies are.
Yeah.
It's like our bodies are trying to send us a message, even if we haven't consciously processed what's going on emotionally.
That's a great point. Our bodies are incredibly wise,
Mm-hmm.
and those physical sensations can be valuable clues that something deeper is happening.
So we've got those emotional shifts and physical sensations. What about our thoughts?
Yeah.
Do those play a role in recognizing triggers?
Absolutely. Our thoughts can be incredibly revealing when it comes to triggers.
Yep.
You might find it hard to focus or concentrate, almost like your mind is racing a mile a minute.
Right.
Intrusive thoughts or memories might pop up unexpectedly,
Mm-hmm.
even if you haven't thought about those experiences in years.
I can imagine that would be pretty unsettling. Is it like having flashbacks, but in your mind instead of visually?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And some people even experience a sense of dissociation or derealization,
Okay.
like they're disconnected from their surroundings or their own body.
Wow, that sounds intense. So we've got the emotional, the physical, the mental. Is there anything else we should be watching for?
Well, how about our behavior? Does
Well-
that change when we're triggered?
Great question.
Our behavior can definitely offer some clues as well.
Okay.
You might notice yourself withdrawing from social situations, avoiding certain people or places, or even engaging in unhealthy coping mechanisms like substance abuse or excessive eating.
It's almost like you're trying to protect yourself from further pain or discomfort,
Right.
even if you're not consciously aware of it.
That's a great way to put it. It's like
Yeah.
our subconscious mind is saying, hey, this situation feels dangerous. Let's get out of here.
So it sounds like the key is to become more attuned to these subtle shifts
Yeah,
in our emotions, our physical sensations, our thoughts, and our behaviors.
exactly.
It's like we're piecing together a puzzle to understand our unique trigger response.
You've got it. It's all about building self-awareness and paying attention to those patterns.
Okay, so let's say you've started to recognize those patterns. What's the next step? What can you actually do to manage those triggers and prevent them from taking over?
That's where the real work begins. It's about learning to navigate those triggers in a way that feels empowering rather than overwhelming.
Right.
And the good news is there are a lot of effective strategies out there to help you do just that.
Okay.
Some people find therapy incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll definitely touch on some therapeutic approaches, but first I want to highlight some practical things you can do on your own in your daily life
Okay.
to build resilience to triggers.
Yes, let's talk about those practical strategies. Our listeners are probably eager to get some actionable tips they can start using right away.
One of the most effective techniques is grounding. It's like having a secret weapon in your arsenal
Okay.
that you can deploy whenever you feel a trigger coming on.
Okay.
Grounding techniques help bring you back to the present moment and reconnect with your body when those overwhelming emotions and thoughts start to spiral.
So it's like an anchor that keeps you from getting swept away by the storm of emotions?
Exactly. It's about finding that sense of stability and presence in your body, even when your mind is racing.
I like that.
One of the simplest and most effective grounding techniques is the 5-4-3-2-1 method.
Okay.
Have you ever tried that one?
I've heard of it. It
Yeah.
sounds pretty straightforward. Can you walk us through it?
Absolutely. It's all about engaging your senses. Start by noticing 5 things you can see around you.
Okay.
It could be anything. The color of the wall, the pattern on a rug, the shape of a cloud outside the window.
Okay.
Then shift your attention to 4 things you can touch. Feel the texture of your clothing, the coolness of a glass of water, the softness of a pet's fur.
I love how simple yet effective that sounds. It's like you're
Yeah.
intentionally shifting your focus away from those internal thoughts and feelings and anchoring yourself in the external world.
But that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Then move on to 3 things. You can hear the hum of the refrigerator, the chirping of birds outside the sound of your own breath. Next, notice 2 things. You can smell a candle burning a fresh cup of coffee, even the scent of the outdoors.
Okay.
And finally, bring your attention to one thing. You can taste a piece of fruit, a mint, or even just the taste of your own saliva.
It's amazing how focusing on our senses can instantly bring us back to the here and now.
It is.
It's like hitting the reset button on our nervous system.
It really can be that powerful. And the best part is you can do it anytime, anywhere.
That's so helpful. What about journaling? I've always found writing to be a great way to process my emotions.
Journaling can be an incredibly valuable tool for managing triggers as well.
Okay.
It allows you to track your triggers, notice any patterns in your responses, and start to understand what might be underlying those reactions.
It's like having a conversation with yourself on paper.
Yeah.
Where you can really explore those thoughts and feelings without judgment or censorship.
Precisely. And as you start to journal regularly, you might notice certain themes emerging. Maybe you realize that you're particularly sensitive to criticism from certain people,
Right.
or that specific environments tend to trigger feelings of anxiety or overwhelm.
So it's not just about venting or releasing those emotions, it's also about gathering information
Right.
and gaining insight into your unique trigger patterns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once you have that insight, you can start to develop more effective coping mechanisms and strategies for managing those triggers.
Okay.
You might start to notice those early warning signs and use a grounding technique before the trigger takes over completely. Or you might use your journal to reframe those negative thoughts and develop more compassionate self-talk.
That's a great point. We often talk to ourselves in ways we'd never talk to a friend, right?
It's so true. And journaling can help us cultivate that same kindness and understanding towards ourselves even when we're feeling triggered.
Right.
It's about recognizing that those negative thoughts are just thoughts, not facts. And that we don't have to believe everything our minds tell us.
I love that. It's about learning to challenge those unhelpful thought patterns.
Yeah.
And create a more supportive inner dialogue. Okay, so we've talked about grounding and journaling. What about social support? I know a lot of people tend to isolate themselves when they're feeling overwhelmed.
Right.
But connection seems so important, especially during difficult times.
You're absolutely right. Connecting with supportive friends, family members, or even a therapist can make a world of difference in managing triggers.
Oh, okay.
Talking about what you're going through, having someone listen without judgment and feeling understood can be incredibly healing.
It's like you're not carrying that burden alone anymore.
Exactly.
Right.
Sharing your experiences with others can help you feel less isolated and more connected.
Right.
And it can also provide valuable insights and perspectives that you might not have considered on your own.
So it's not just about venting or seeking sympathy. It's also about gaining support and learning from others who might have gone through similar experiences.
That's right. And remember, you don't have to go through this alone. There are so many resources available, whether it's a support group, a therapist, or even online communities where you can connect with others who understand what you're going through.
That's so reassuring. It's like knowing you have the whole team of people in your corner, cheering you on and helping you navigate those tricky emotional terrains.
Exactly. And speaking of teams and support, sometimes it can be incredibly beneficial to seek professional guidance.
Okay.
Let's shift gears a bit and explore some of the therapeutic approaches that have proven to be effective in treating trauma and managing triggers.
Yes. Let's dive into the therapy world. So many people have heard of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. It seems to be like the go-to therapy these days.
Yeah, it's very popular.
But how does it actually work when it comes to dealing with triggers?
Well, CBT is really good at tackling triggers because it gets you to look at the negative thought patterns that are fueling those intense emotional responses.
Right.
You know, Dr. Aaron Beck, one of the pioneers of CBT, was all about how our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are interconnected. So if you can shift those negative thought patterns, you can change how you feel and react when a trigger pops up.
So instead of letting those automatic negative thoughts just take over, CBT helps you press pause and actually question those thoughts.
Exactly. Let's say you're triggered by a critical comment at work.
Okay.
Your immediate thought might be, I'm a total failure.
Right.
But CBT would guide you to examine that thought.
Okay.
Is one comment really a reflection of your entire worth?
Right.
Probably not. So you'd learn to replace that harsh thought with a more balanced one like, this feedback is helpful and I can use it to improve.
That's so empowering.
It is.
It's like you're taking back control instead of letting those negative thoughts run the show.
Exactly. And there's a ton of research backing up how well CBT works for a wide range of challenges.
Yeah.
From anxiety and depression to PTSD and, of course, managing triggers.
What about exposure therapy? I've heard it can help with phobias, but I'm not sure how it applies to psychological triggers.
Exposure therapy can be really powerful for desensitizing yourself to triggers.
Okay.
It's about gradually and safely exposing yourself to the thing that triggers you in a controlled setting, starting with less intense versions and working your way up.
So kind of like dipping your toe in the water before jumping into the deep end?
Exactly. It's about retraining your brain's response to the trigger, showing it that it's not actually dangerous.
Right.
Think of it like this. Imagine you're terrified of spiders.
Okay.
Exposure therapy might start with you looking at pictures of spiders, then watching videos,
Okay.
then maybe being in the same room as a spider in a closed container, all the way up to actually holding a spider.
Wow.
It's a gradual process, and it's done with the guidance of a trained therapist to ensure your safety and comfort.
That makes sense. It's like slowly building up your tolerance and showing your brain that the trigger isn't the threat it perceives it to be.
That's a great way to put it, and it's backed by some remarkable research,
Okay.
especially by Dr. Edna Foa, a leading expert in trauma therapy.
Okay.
Her work has shown how effective exposure therapy can be for PTSD.
That's really encouraging to hear. Now, what about mindfulness?
Okay.
It seems to be everywhere these days,
It is.
but I'm not sure how it applies to something as intense as dealing with triggers.
Well, mindfulness can be incredibly helpful for managing triggers because it teaches you to observe your thoughts and emotions without judgment.
Okay.
It's like creating a space between you and those intense feelings, allowing you to watch them come and go without getting swept away.
So instead of getting caught up in the emotional whirlwind, you're learning to step back and observe those feelings with a sense of detachment.
Exactly. It's not about suppressing or denying those emotions.
Right.
It's about acknowledging them without letting them control you.
Okay.
Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who developed mindfulness-based stress reduction, has done some amazing work showing how regular mindfulness practice can reduce stress, help you manage your emotions better, and just improve your overall well-being.
That's fantastic. It sounds like a really valuable skill to develop, especially in our fast-paced world.
It really is. And there's another therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT,
Okay.
which is all about learning to accept those difficult thoughts and emotions as part of being human. It focuses on taking action that aligns with your values, even when you're feeling triggered.
So it's about recognizing that you don't have to be ruled by your emotions. You can choose how you want to respond, even when those feelings are intense.
Exactly. It's about developing psychological flexibility, the ability to be present with your emotions without letting them dictate your actions.
Okay, so we've talked about CBT, exposure therapy, mindfulness, and ACT.
Right.
Those all sound incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
Are there any other approaches that might be helpful for people exploring therapy options for triggers?
Yes, definitely. There are several other therapies that can be effective. Somatic experiencing, developed by Dr. Peter Levine,
Okay.
focuses on how trauma gets stored in the body.
And helps you gently release that tension. It's like giving your body a way to process and heal those old wounds.
It's fascinating how much our bodies hold on to. It's like they're trying to tell us something, even if we haven't consciously processed those experiences.
That's a great way to put it. And then there's EMDR,
Okay.
eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which uses bilateral stimulation, usually eye movements,
Okay.
while you're recalling a traumatic memory.
Okay.
Like helping your brain reprocess those experiences in a way that's less distressing.
And I've also heard about EFT, emotional freedom techniques, but I'm not sure if it's a legitimate approach.
EFT, also known as tapping, is a bit more unconventional,
Okay.
but it's gaining traction. It combines cognitive restructuring with acupressure points.
Okay.
And some promising research suggests it can be helpful for anxiety, trauma, and even physical pain.
Wow. We've covered a lot of ground today. This has been an incredibly informative deep dive into the world of triggers.
It has been.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
You're welcome. Before we wrap up, any final words of wisdom for our listeners on their journey to understanding and managing their triggers?
Well, it's crucial to remember that managing triggers is an ongoing process, a journey of self-discovery and growth.
Okay.
It's not about achieving some perfect state where you're never triggered again.
Right.
It's about developing self-awareness, building those coping skills, and cultivating resilience over time.
So it's like any other skill. It takes practice, patience, and a whole lot of self-compassion.
Exactly. And remember, there will be setbacks along the way. There will be moments when you feel overwhelmed, and that's okay.
Right.
It's all part of the learning process.
That's such an important reminder. We often put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect,
Yeah.
But the truth is we're all human, and we're all going to have moments when we struggle.
Absolutely. And it's in those moments of struggle that we have the opportunity to learn and grow the most.
Well, that's a really hopeful and empowering message to end on. Triggers can be powerful, but they don't have to control our lives.
That's right.
With the right tools and support, we can learn to navigate them and create a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
Couldn't agree more.
This has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you've gained some valuable insights into the world of triggers and feel equipped to start exploring your own emotional landscape with a sense of curiosity and compassion.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time.
Thank you for joining us on this journey into the complex world of psychological triggers. We hope this episode has given you insight into recognizing and understanding your own triggers and equipped you with practical strategies to manage them. Remember, self-awareness and resilience are journeys, not destinations. If you found today's discussion helpful, subscribe to Cognitive Curves for more insights, drop a comment, and share this episode with someone who might benefit. Stay curious and take care of yourselves until next time.